Hello and welcome to Visions of BVA. My name is Steve Baskus. Today we talk with Paul Mimms, the National President of the Blinded Veterans Association. We'll discuss communication improvements, financial stability, and advocacy efforts to enhance, support, and access to care for veterans. Join us as we explore the evolving needs of blind veterans and the BVA's innovative strategies for meeting them.
Go to BVA.org to find out how you can directly make a difference in the lives of the brave men and women who have given their eyesight in defense of our freedom. They fought for your independence, and by going to BVA.org, you can find out how to help these veterans regain theirs. Go to BVA.org today.
Paul Mimms, can you just maybe introduce yourself briefly, who you are, what you do for the Blinded Veterans Association, and then I'll ask you another question.
I'm Paul Mimms. I'm the National President of the Blinded Veterans Association. I guess I can say I've been a member for now 38 years, since actually May of 1986 I joined.
So can you share a brief overview of your journey and involvement with the Blinded Veterans Association, how you got involved with it, and then also touch on how it led you to the role of president?
Okay. I actually joined the BVA in 1986. I guess I would say that was the beginning of my life as a blind person after rehab. I actually joined at the Hines VA Blind Center while I was there. Then I came back, and I was just finishing up my first year of my bachelor's degree education. I went on to get my master's degree. But in 1989, I started working with the VIS coordinator at the Kansas City VA and met several people. One of those was a man named Willie Brown, who started up to be Missouri Regional Group. And so I'm actually one of the charter members, and I'm not sure who else is alive that was a charter member, but following that, in 2000, I moved to Florida. And so I was active in the Florida Regional Group, even though I was there as a computer instructor and later on a VIS coordinator, but I was also a district director. Then I became vice president and then ultimately president of the Florida Regional Group. In 2009, I moved back to Kansas City, where I was from, and then I resumed my activity with the Missouri Regional Group. I served as secretary and then later on vice president and then treasurer, or then president of the Missouri Regional Group. And from there, I served for several years as president. And one of the things that I did, though, while I was secretary was get our 501c3 done. In 2014, a gentleman named Timothy Hornick and I met, 13 actually we met. We went through the effort of merging Kansas Regional Group with Missouri Regional Group, and we named it Heartland Regional Group. And so now the name is still Heartland Regional Group. We got our charter in 2014. And since then, we've added Nebraska and Iowa as states in our regional group. And so we actually have gotten a couple of visits into the Iowa City and Des Moines VA hospitals and are working on getting them invigorated, because I don't believe there's ever been much of an Iowa regional group before. And so we're trying to get that going, and there's some people that want to be part of that. And so now I'm no longer a member of the regional group, Well, I'm not an officer of the regional group, but I'm a member of the regional group. So I hang in there with them and give them advice and support for what they're doing, and I actually participate.
No, thank you, Paul. I'm going to ask you these questions, and hopefully, we'll just have a little bit of time to converse, and just
Sure.
have general. So this next question is, what are your primary goals for the BVA during your presidency?
Well, I've already started on one of my goals. I recognized a long time ago that there was a communication breakdown when it comes to the membership being able to communicate with the board or get communication from the board. And I don't know whether it was a lack of desire or just a lack of recognition of the need for the board to communicate with the membership. Either way, or both, communication was not good when I took over. And so what I've been working on is trying to enhance that communication, make it better, and connect the board more closely to the membership and the membership more closely to the board in terms of our day-to-day operations. It's true enough that the board of directors carries on the business of the BVA and most other organizations between annual meetings. I don't interpret that to mean that there's radio silence between annual meetings. And I think we thrive on the communication that takes place between annual meetings as we get some input from the membership, which is actually, if not just suggestions, it's often advice that we can take and execute in the face of those. And so that's the biggest thing I've tried to promulgate, I think, in my presidency, is just enhance that communication. One way that I did that is I created what's known as Team BVA. I took the chairs of what used to be our committees, some of our committees, namely the Women Veterans Committee. It's now the Women Veterans Outreach Group. The Blind Veteran Dog Handlers Committee is now the Blind Veteran Dog Handlers Outreach Group, its full title. I also created, from what we had, Adaptive Sports and Recreation Outreach Group. All of these are outreach groups in that they have a committee that puts together the action of each of those programs. But then the chair and the committee also host a membership meeting each month where the general membership then interacts with them. The vice president of our BVA, Wade Davis, moderates the meetings of the Team BVA. So he gets input from the chairs when they have their Team BVA meeting. And then when the chairs have their membership meeting, they gather any information, report it back to Wade at their next Team BVA meeting. Wade transfers that information back to the board of directors. If there's any action items in there, we take them. We feed that back through Wade, back to the chairs back to the membership, and it just keeps. And so we're trying to create that cycle so that there's continuing and ongoing communication between all levels of our organization. Staff is not included on any of these committees or groups, working groups or programs, as you might say, although there is interface, but we control that interface. And so all of these groups are made up of members.
Absolutely. It makes perfect sense, Paul. I appreciate your response and answer. And this kind of, I guess, maybe this question you've kind of answered to some degree. How do you envision the BVA evolving to meet the changing needs of blind veterans and visually impaired veterans in the coming future?
That's another long answer, Steve. But one of the things that's happened over the 79 years that BVA has been in existence is that they were an organization that was, in a lot of ways, just a social touch point. And although we always had the mission of advocating on behalf of blind veterans, we were kind of doing that as an organization that still had a great social purpose. And I'm not saying that's going away, but I'm saying that the atmosphere in which we operate pretty much compels us to become much more of a business. Other veteran service organizations are vying for the same donations through grants and other funds as we do. So we've had to step up our game, so to speak, in order to be competitive in that market. And so as president, I felt compelled to drive some changes. I hope people like, and some people won't like, because they think that, well, for instance, the VBA is coming too automated, or it's becoming too digitally based, and we're moving past some of the old longtime members and their reluctance or inability to operate in that space of computer use and digitized information. For the sake of the regional groups, we try to get the regional group officers stepping up to that level. In the end, though, I've got a Star Trek quote from Mr. Spock. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And that's kind of how this is going. The many are those people that are the membership of BVA. The few are those that just can't quite get to the digital area of communication these days. The one is anybody that thinks that they can stop it all by themselves, or thinks that their individual needs should drive everything. And so I see us already moving in a direction in which we are becoming much more of a business. And the biggest way we'll see that is, I think, in terms of how we're raising funds. People forget that we operate off donations, whether it's monthly donations from members or non-members, as well as the bequests that might fall our way but are dropping off. And then the other is just what we might be able to pursue in terms of grants and other sources of donation. That's where we need to be more competitive. And so we're looking at things behind the scenes a lot of people don't recognize, such as our standing and rating with things like Charity Navigator and the Better Business Bureau, and trying to get our rating up there to as close to the top as we can get it, so that when people check us out as an organization, we rate high, and there we rate respectable, and therefore we rate as eligible for these other sources of funding that we need to pursue actively. I think that's the biggest thing, is that we're changing, but somebody will mention, well, we've got investments, and so why don't we just use those? If we could do that, and we would last about 5 years, maybe 10 at the outside, and then there wouldn't be any more BVA unless we take this step to financially stabilize ourselves, establish some revenue streams. In other words, income that's repeatedly coming in, so that we can actually strike a budget, having an idea of what's going to be coming in, and not go over budget, trying to do what everybody else thinks we should do, and actually be able to do those things and be honest about our ability to tell the membership what we're going to be able to do and what we're not, and be able to substantiate our statements as well. One thing I've promoted already is making the board of directors more public facing and therefore transparent. I don't think we've ever done it before, but now the minutes of the board meeting are posted on our website at bva.org. So once the meeting happens, the meeting minutes are taken up at the next board meeting, And once they're voted on as being approved, they're pretty much immediately posted on the BVA website for the whole membership to view, at least what the board did at their meeting. I don't know if we'll ever advance to the point where board meetings are open, but I think everybody can anticipate the chaos there. But this is a step that we can take toward being at least transparent, and that opens us up for input. Well, how come you didn't, or why did you do that? And we're trying to make up ways that we can answer those questions when we get them. I think those are the two biggest things: being public facing and transparent, and at the same time improving our communication to and through all levels of our organization. And I think those are the two biggest things I'm trying to do. And that actually spokes out to a lot of things, like being able to solidify the communication with regional groups and the board, as well as memberships. And so that regional groups know what tasks they're needing to complete in order to be good standing, and then communicate with them the deadlines and the content that we need in order to get regional groups in good standing and in a good place to do business at their level as well.
One more question in this particular area, and you've mentioned a few things already. Maybe there's some other ones, but I'll go ahead and ask it. Are there new programs or initiatives that you're particularly excited about? Well,
one thing I'm really excited about is Team BVA. And we seem to be getting some good feedback from the membership, which is what's important. And so, I mean, it's a new initiative. I actually put that into action. And I'm looking for good things to happen with that over the years. I don't know that we're developing any new programs at this point, but we're going to be expanding the ones that we have. And there is one other program that I didn't mention, but that I want to stand up, following the convention this year. And that is something in the name of a spiritual outreach program. And so that we have, at least address the need of the members of BVA when it comes to spirituality or spiritual support. I think all of us can recognize the fact that's out there. Veteran suicides are on the rise. Not just blind veterans, but veteran suicides. Part of that is because they live longer. And so it used to be everybody would die when they were about 60 years old. So when you weren't living to be 75 and getting macular degeneration, which is up there among the leading causes of blindness now. And so if you talk about a guy that I'll pick as an example, who retired after working for 47 years, and he and his wife have talked about getting a Winnebago and traveling. And so before he takes off on his first trip, he goes to the eye doctor because he's been noticing these spots and he wanted to figure that out before he got on the road. Then he finds out he's got glaucoma or he's got macular degeneration. And there goes the dream that he's worked for all those years. Those are the kind of people that are, depressed by what their future looks like. And a lot of times they resort to not wanting to live like that. And so among the candidates for veteran suicide are certainly going to be those older veterans and any other age of veterans, quite frankly, that are facing vision loss. There are other of the current conflict veterans, of course, we know. They've had other losses, and hopefully battlefield medicine has reduced their likelihood of becoming totally blind, but it still happens. And so I think that we are going to need that spiritual aspect to our programs in order to support those veterans that think that that's why they need the support of BVA. And right now we don't have it. I don't know that we've ever had it to a great extent. but I would like to see if we can't develop something that is, within the scope of our charter and within the scope of our bylaws, that we can provide that service to our member veterans.
Paul, that's very commendable. I think it's something that is very, very important and should be spearheaded. So I wish the best to that program and that initiative. So you spoke on Capitol Hill in March of 2024, not too long ago. Could you discuss the key points of your testimony and maybe what you aimed, to convey in your message?
Certainly. Of course, our legislative team pretty much composed the testimony into a document that I then reviewed, and then it was my duty and opportunity to present it to the Congressional Veteran Affairs Committees, both the House and Senate Veteran Affairs Committees. The primary points that I picked out of there, I think were most important, ended up being our request that there be formed a federal advisory committee on equal access. And a lot of what I spoke to in the testimony on other points, like women veterans, that the VA step up their act and get women veteran clinic services established and equipped as a priority, and that they continue to fund blind rehab services. And one thing that blind rehab did, they took the 81,000 veterans that were legally blind and they added to that 50,000 more veterans, so that they're serving now about 81,000 veterans on the VIS roster. The real number, however, is that there are probably over 1 million blind and visually impaired veterans in the country. So right now we're sitting a little over 7,000 members, and we haven't scratched the surface of that. If they were to all show up in 6 weeks, we would be dead in the water. So we need to prepare ourselves for being able to engage through clinic services all of those veterans that might want to come. And we represent potentially all of them. The other thing was vision research. I requested that the Senate Appropriations Committee donate $30 million to vision research, both combat field research as well as just the pathologies of vision loss and research on that. I also addressed the notion that mental health care was more needed now than it used to be, in particular suicides, and that the VA might consider using physician's assistants to provide, or psychiatric assistants to provide some of that mental health care, rather than having to put it all off on psychologists or psychiatrists, in order to have enough professionals to provide that mental health care that's needed when it's needed. And one thing that, as I presented all those points, I also presented the notion that we support the legislation that would support those veterans' claims to full benefits when they retire, even after they've been disabled on active duty, served their full retirement term, and right now they have to take an offset. Their disability pay is subtracted from their retirement pay. And although I didn't mention it, that disabled veteran wasn't double dipping when they were disabled. They were serving fully. They need to be compensated fully, is our point and our position. And they also need to be, of course, receive their full retirement pay that they served for. So we support that. I missed my opportunity, I think, because I took too long with these others. I had 5 minutes. I think they told me I ran about 7. But I missed transportation, but I didn't mean to belittle it. But I instead revisited my contention that we need that committee on equal access. Because everything that I mentioned hangs on that. And we need that committee where we have a venue in which we can advocate for that equal access, certainly on the part of blind veterans. And we would hopefully be able to continue to advocate within and beyond that committee with other organizations like Paralyzed Vets of America to see that there's equal access to all veterans, regardless of their condition, whether it's a disabling condition or whether it's, not so obvious like PTSD, that they have equal access to the services that we need and that we're not being excluded by the way that we're treated. And one point that I made strongly was that the way that often we blinded veterans are handled by VA personnel. They took the unit of handling a blind veteran out of the new employee orientation with the VA medical centers. So now people are having to try to figure it out as a new employee, and they're grabbing my dog's leash or the harness handle, or they're grabbing me by the sleeve and pulling me and walk me up to a chair and then say, okay, and grab my shoulders and twist me and then gently push and say, have a seat. And I think if you've ever had that done, you realize how unsafe you feel. And so I advocated for that as well. And that's something that we think that the committee would be able to address, because there are other conditions, like you don't push wheelchairs down the steps because you're in a hurry. So we need the same consideration for safety as other veterans might get. I'm happy to say that our initial findings are that committee seems like it might get some traction. I believe it's passed the Senate, and we hope to get the House to pass it. Given what's going on in Congress, we're hoping. We don't know what's going to happen. But in terms of the handling of veterans in VA facilities, I think we're going to be able to make some traction there as well, because there are initiatives coming down that will hopefully restore that little 15-minute piece of new employee orientation that will do so much to maintain, if not just establish, our dignity and our sense of self after we leave an encounter with VA personnel.
Thank you, Paul. It's all very impactful and worthwhile initiatives and testimony and things to focus on and some of the things you just last spoke about. I absolutely understand, being a blind veteran myself. You kind of touched on this, but I mean, do you believe that the testimony was received well? What is your thoughts, if at all, on that?
I believe that it was, and we've gotten some feedback from a few people on how well it was received, and we did some visits on Capitol Hill following the testimony while we were in the DC area for our mid-year board meeting. And we actually got some great questions and some requests for clarification of the points in our testimony from the staff members of some of the members of the Veteran Affairs committees. And so from there is, some of the reports that we're getting that attest to the fact that the testimony was impactful. Our points were well taken, and they're deemed worthy of action on several of them. And of course, the other thing that stands in the way, as almost always, is money and whether they can fit the initiatives necessary within the budget of the VA.
Yeah, what are some of the biggest challenges the BVA is currently facing, and how do you want to approach those? Like, I don't know if there was anything else you want to expand on, but you already touched on a few, like revenue stream and a few others. So maybe you don't have anything else to add to that.
Well, I've got something I can add that is a concern.
Sure.
And it's something we're going to have to address as an organization in several venues and discussions, and that is the fact that Right now, I think we've got about 38 regional groups. Pretty much every state used to have a regional group. So, short story, regional groups are declining in numbers. And regardless of what the reason is, we're having to try to find strategies to either keep them going. And if that fails, we're going to have to find strategies for how to replace regional groups as our primary unit of integration and interaction among our veterans. And so it may be that we don't necessarily have all of the, I'll say, vim and vigor and excitement that our regional groups used to have. One fact is that our younger veterans are just not joiners. They want something different than to sit around American Legion or DAV or VFW Hall and, tell war stories and get drunk. They learn better. They want better. And so we're already involved in trying to offer them better. They're interested in activities. The current theater veterans, a lot of them went in with families already in place and started. So when they come out, they want to be engaged in activities, a lot of which they can involve their families. They want to have, a surety of benefits for what they earned when they served. And so we need to be mindful of the intensity and direction of our advocacy efforts to ensure them that. And then hopefully we can engage them in helping us, because I maintain that the voice of our organization is as loud as the number of members that we have. More members, louder voice. And if those members are invested in what we're trying to advocate for and about, then we'll speak more loudly to what we need. And so that, I think, is the key of it. We need to get these other veterans that aren't interested in joining, interested in at least engaging and participating. And so that's why we're looking at reworking our programs to be more interesting and more excitement generating to these new veterans. So we're doing more things like trying to develop, fishing tours, kayaking tours, along with the mountain climbing and the kayaking tours down the Colorado River, or canoe trips, float trips, because we want to engage those veterans that are still around that aren't that interested in the high testosterone or high adrenaline adventures, because, the females don't generate that high testosterone, and I don't want to ignore them. But we want to have a dominoes tournament, a bid whist tournament, or horseshoes, or, if they really want to play shuffleboard, we'll, underwrite that. And camping trips, where we can find places where we can put together camping trips or retreats. So we're looking at those as different kinds of activities, and possibly including some of that in terms of a touch point that we would create as part of our annual conventions as well.
I have only a few more questions for you, Paul.
Okay.
What can members of the public do to support the BVA and its initiatives and programs?
Okay. In the last issue of our BVA bulletin, my President's Corner article dealt with, our finances, where they come from, and our need for developing the revenue stream I talked about before. And what I, proposed there, first, I mentioned the fact that I've committed to donating $100 a month. Just as a member of BVA, I donate $100 a month to BVA. What I asked was that veteran members, and of course anybody else that reads that, consider donating anything they can. If it's $5, $10 a month, whatever, it's just as important as my $100. It wasn't a challenge to match me. It was simply a challenge to join me in donating a little bit that you can, because every little bit helps. toward giving us finances and surety in being able to promote our programs and our mission. And so as I walk around in my community, I try to find ways and find different kinds of people and groups that I can encourage them. Something you can think about, and I thought about this the other day. There are organizations that say, we really like the work you're doing and da-da-da-da-da. And so I'm not beyond asking them, well, what does your group think about coming up with a number that you would go to donate on an ongoing basis to BVA to help us over time be able to continue to fund our programs, missions, and the like. So it doesn't have to be all individuals, although it can be individuals. That's where it starts. But it could be, organizations, clubs of any kind, groups of any kind, and they could think about how they might be able to add to that donation campaign.
Awesome, Paul. Thank you. Paul, what has been the most rewarding part of working for the BVA?
Well, I guess it has to be just those occasional stories that come in from veterans who have really gained from their interaction with the BVA, especially those veterans that, because they engaged with the BVA, they found out about blind rehab services. And regardless of the skepticism or reluctance they might have had, they went to BRC. And then they found out what a wonderful opportunity after a few days that this was going to be. And then they're so appreciative after they finished. And that's that group of veterans that's finding out, when can I go back? And so BVA established the blind rehab program and led to the establishment of the blind rehab centers following the establishment of the one in Hines in 1948. And so I think it's rewarding because that's kind of the pinnacle of involvement that we can offer people. And that is to go to one of our blind rehab centers, get the necessary rehabilitation that you can benefit from in order to live your life in a lifestyle that's as close to that of the mainstream population as possible, empowering you to do what you can in spite of your vision loss. And I think I'm just totally ingratiated by hearing people that think that they've reached that or they're on their way there.
That's amazing, Paul. Thank you.
I would add to that, as president, they can double my salary if they want, and I would still get nothing, except for the fact that what I just described is my paycheck. That's my paycheck. If I've got satisfied veterans that I serve, and they appreciate what I've able to lead this organization and to helping them achieve, that's my paycheck.
It's a wonderful way to look at it. I think the last thing to touch on, because, you are the president of the Blinded Veterans Association, and this might be a difficult question, but, and you just basically touched on some things, but maybe asking this question will help you think about it differently, or maybe you have something you do have in the back of your mind. Are there any personal experiences or stories that have deeply influenced your leadership within the BVA?
Well, I've got to think two of them are. When I first got elected to the board of directors in 2013, that let me know that people respected me, some aspect of me, hopefully my leadership, and that it could do something to help advance changes and just empowerment within the BVA in terms of its membership. Certainly the most empowering event in my BVA life has to be that I actually was elected president. I mean, that's an honor that I think goes far. Not everybody gets there. Not everybody wants to get there. I decided I would if I could, and if I was asked, and I did. I considered an honor that I was elected. The third one is that I am one of the recipients of the Major General Melvin J. Moss Award. That's BVA's highest award. It's a Lifetime Achievement Award. And I have to say, that was a proud moment in my life. And then what was she, 90-year-old mother was there to see me get that award. I think those three are the most satisfying experiences that I've had in my BVA life.
I appreciate you sharing that, and I congratulate you, Paul, for everything that you've accomplished and for everything that you do now and into the future for the Blinded Veterans Association.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Paul, thank you so much for those comments and statements, and thank you for being on the show.
You're more than welcome, and I hope people enjoy listening to this and find some inspiration or at least some understanding of what I've had to say.
Thank you so very much for listening to the podcast today, and a special thanks to Paul Mimms for joining us. If you get the chance, subscribe to our podcast, share it, and rate it. Until next time, this is Steve Baskus, signing off. You're listening to a BVA production.